Hello, everybody. Welcome back to You Can't Win. This is Tom here, co-hosting with Don, as usual.
Hello.
And today we are joined by our friend Big Kevin, and he's going to be talking to us about life in Alaska.
Hi, it's me, Big Kevin.
Well, I guess I don't know, are we going to be calling you Big Kevin or Brian? What do you like to go by?
You can call me Brian. Big Kevin has been my online brand for like a decade, but yeah, my name is Brian.
Yeah. How did that work? Why did you go with Kevin?
That was it's Kevin. It's like Kevin misspelled. That was a million years ago. I was big in quotes Kevin, parentheses from work end parentheses, which was just kind of the idea of like I'd worked a bunch of shitty jobs at that point, and it's like you always got just the dumbest people in the world you work with at that kind of stuff, and it's like I want to be that guy.
Right.
Was that like in Hell Dump and all that, like the ancient essay kind of stuff, or?
That was I know both of you guys from the Something Awful forums and Hell Dump, and then later WDDP.org and all that stuff. Laziz, or what was it called? The Rizone. But yeah, that was WDDP.org, I think, where I was Big Kevin.
Sure.
Yeah, so I guess we were going to talk a little bit about your life in Alaska. Like I understand you're now living in New York, but were you born in Alaska? That's where you grew up?
We moved up there. My family moved up there when I was 2 years old. So I wasn't born there, but like effectively that's all I've ever known. Or growing up, I went to school there and everything. I am in New York now, but doing stand-up and improv. But I've been in Alaska most of my life. Yeah.
Okay, so how does it compare to New York? Like, I guess if that's that's all you knew. Like when you moved to New York, what did you notice was like a big difference between, or maybe something that was kind of stood out to you as like particularly odd about life in Alaska that you realized it, seeing the difference?
It's kind of one of those funny things where, it doesn't matter what your experience is growing up. That's just normal to you, because you have nothing to compare it to. So, in my head, it's not like what's weird about Alaska. It's like what's weird about New York. The big thing is obviously just the people, and less the people in and of themselves, and more like the energy of it. Like everybody's always trying to get over on you. Versus in Alaska, it's like, here's a good one. Like people honk like crazy in New York, because of course everybody knows. In Alaska, it's like if you honk at somebody, like that's you're starting a pretty serious relationship.
Do you drive in New York or quite a bit, or like do you have a car, or do you just okay? So that's
No, it's like I couldn't afford to park it, like much less drive it. So yeah.
Yeah. What is your living situation right now in New York? Like, what are you up to? Like, do you have your own place, or you have like sharing it with like other comedians and stuff?
I have a place I got with. I just got it off of Craigslist. I realized that that's Web 1.0, but it's still a pretty good place to find roommates, in my experience. Yeah, it's pretty chill. I found a pretty nice place. I got no complaints about that.
Cool. And so when you came to New York for a stint before, right? So how much time have you kind of spent outside of Alaska total, kind of like in the last like in your adult life kind of thing?
Basically, I've spent hard to say, several years total. I mean, I lived in Hawaii for a little while. I lived in Minneapolis for a little while. I lived in Hawaii or New York. But it's kind of whenever I'd run low on money, it's like I'd go back to Alaska and work construction until I was till I was stocked up again.
Sure. And you said so in construction you kind of do more managerial stuff. Has that always been the case, or like project management kind of stuff, or were you more kind of like line work kind of stuff before?
I don't know how interesting this is, so I'll go over it real quick. I started I started as basically just labor, unskilled labor. I did that for a while. I worked the up on the slope, not on the slope, but I lived. There's kind of the supply town there called Dead Horse, and I worked there for a while. Then I moved to government side, so I worked testing, basically materials testing, quality type stuff. And after a couple years of that, I basically got promoted out of that into I do more like office-oriented stuff, more like they call it. They call the guy who runs it a project engineer,
Okay.
which is not to be confused with a professional engineer. Um,
Hmm.
but that's like I'm like one or two rungs down from that guy, so I'd be like the number two or number three man on a job.
Sure. And do you need like a special education for that, or is it more learn on the job kind of stuff?
No, I my undergrad is in sociology.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of a funny thing because it's like the work I do now is like I do the work of an engineer, but no, I am not an engineer.
Sure. So, and when do you still have to go out into the like live remotely? Like, say if you go back this summer or something, would you have to live basically like in the cabin out in the middle of nowhere, or like would you be more kind of um back office kind of stuff?
What I've been doing recently is more town oriented, so I haven't worked remotely in the last
Okay.
couple of years. But
Sure.
theoretically, I could, and it's just you just end up in like if you've ever seen in a movie like in Sopranos, when like Tony goes to the construction office and it's just like a double wide trailer. Like basically that's what you're working
Yeah.
on.
Sure. Because I remember, I mean, seeing you before when it seemed like you were out in the middle of nowhere and didn't really have a lot of kind of like I don't know, like resources around you kind of thing. Like it kind of like, it seemed like it was quite isolated, some of the projects. I don't know. So I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah, a lot of that stuff because we're doing a lot of what we're doing is maintenance. It's not necessarily like new construction. It's like refurbished 20 miles of road or whatever. So that 20 miles of road might be like, I mean, the nearest town might be like 30, 40 miles away, type of thing,
Okay.
sometimes further. So yeah, it's like you work like 10, 12 hours and then you go back to your trailer and like I just like watch. I was like the last person buying DVDs in the world because I'd buy stuff on DVD and
Yeah.
like watch whole seasons.
I actually buy, yeah, I still buy DVDs because I live in a very not great internet area in rural Canada. So um, I don't know. I've carried on the tradition, I guess. But
Yeah, that's
yeah,
one of the, in fact, it just closed this last summer. One of the last like two or three blockbusters in the country was there in Fairbanks, and it's for exactly that reason. People live out in Goldstream and like they just don't have internet, so they're still like
yeah, yeah, yeah. Sure.
renting Adam Sandler movies.
Yeah. Um, yeah. So, I mean, like, what is it? I only know from movies and stuff like Alaska stuff. So I only know some of the like dimly kind of like, is it like where you were? Is it only light certain times of the day or something like that kind of thing? Like very, very limited amount or always bright or something like that? I don't know.
Yeah, I lived in Fairbanks, which is it, it's in the interior basically, and Alaska is like way bigger than people think it is. So it's like the interior. We're like 300 miles north of Anchorage, which is the south coast, and then it's like another 400-ish miles north to Dead Horse, which is the north slope. So we get yeah, you don't get 100% dark, but it's pretty depressing in the winter because it's like you go to work, it's dark. You look out at 11 a.m., it's still dark. 2 o'clock, it's light. You go home at 4, it's dark. That's your day.
Wow. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, yeah. So did you, I mean, was that a problem just like mental health wise? Is like, does that really affect you or just not that big of a deal?
It's one of those things where it's like, you know, what does a fish think about water?
Okay. Yeah.
I didn't know anything else, but yeah, for people who move up there, the winters can be very tough. And the other thing that's tough for people who move up there is in the summer, the sun never really sets. You
Yeah.
just get like a couple hours of twilights from like 1 to 3 a.m. And it can be hard for people to sleep. They have to get like blackout curtains and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, Finland is kind of similar. I kind of remember that in Finland. I remember going out for like a midsummer's thing, which was like a big bonfire by a lake, and it was just bright out and kind of lost track of time. And we started walking home. And we're like, Wonder what time it is." You look at your watch, and it's like 2 in the morning, and it looks like just like it's middle of the day. The sun just kind of like goes down a bit in the sky and then goes right back up. It doesn't really actually set or anything.
Yeah, that was like our tradition with mom was at like midnight on the summer solstice, we'd all we'd go for a bike ride and like we'd bike to McDonald's or whatever, and it'd be like 2 a.m. and it'd be noon basically.
Wow. What about the temperature and stuff? Is that it, like, is it like, I see, I get that a lot for living in Canada, just people always think that it's cold all the time, but sort of during the summer, is it not bad or is it?
Summers are really nice. Summers, it's like 75, 80 degrees, where it's nice, but it's not like hot. Like summers are great. If you can afford it, then you want to go on a vacation. It's a great place to spend like July.
Oh yeah. Like what would the temperature be like around July?
July, like I said, it'd be like, you'd be hitting 80, but like low
Okay.
80s, not super humid, like just pretty nice.
Okay.
And it's like
Um,
beautiful
yeah.
up there in terms of the nature, right? Like from what I've seen and heard.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's one of those things where like living up there, like you don't notice it like moment to moment, but like every once in a while, it's like you'll look up and it's like, whoa, like I'm basically just sitting in a postcard right now.
Yeah. I sort of think about that with like Washington State was kind of like that too. Like Chicago does not have much to offer in that department. So whenever I go back to Washington, it's just like, whoa, I miss this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice to just have that view of the skyline where it's like mountains and trees and not just like buildings and shit.
hmm
Sorry. Can I swear on this podcast?
You,
Yeah, yeah.
Is this a swearing
yeah.
positive podcast?
um, yeah. So do you find you miss it right now, or is it because you've been in New York
I've
for
been
a
here
few
about a
months
year
now,
this
right?
time.
So at least so.
Yeah, coming up
Yeah.
on already a year. Um, yeah, I miss. I don't miss not being able to like do anything. But I miss the air. I
Yeah,
miss
yeah,
like
yeah.
all that kind of stuff. Yeah, definitely.
What kind of stuff did you like do for fun when you were a kid in Alaska?
So most people up there, snow machining is very big up there. Not snowmobiling. In Alaska, it's specifically called snow machining.
Okay.
Um, Hunting's very
Hmm.
big. Hockey's very big. Uh, of course, I was a little nerd boy, so I did none of that stuff. Um, I'll tell you something I remember from my childhood. We used to, there'd be so much snow that like the snow would get like snow blown and piled up by the house so high that you could just climb up onto the roof from that pile of snow. So I remember like playing outside and we'd climb up onto the roof from the snow and we'd play on the roof.
That's pretty
That's funny.
cool.
Yeah. So I mean, while you were up there, the last few times you tried to do some stuff like continue on with improv while you were up there, right? So was that like through a university group or something, or is it like is there some sort of college there or something that you were doing? Or
Yeah, yeah, I was doing some stuff at the University of Alaska Fairbanks there. I was doing, uh, unlike many improvisers do college improv and then they do, which is usually short form, then they go do long form in Chicago or New York or LA. I did long form in New York, then I went back to Alaska and did short form with the college group. After graduating college, I just went back up to the
yeah,
college there and was like, "Hey, can I hang out?
sure.
I'm an
No, no,
old
no, but
man. Can
it's
I hang
yeah,
out with you?"
yeah. So actually, are you doing like so you're doing long form again now, or is that what you're up to now, or is it um you said you're working with like a coach and things again, or in New
Yeah,
York? Or?
I have one. I have one team that I'm pretty serious with, and then I do some, some pickup, more rehearsal type stuff, some jams, all that sort of stuff. But I guess I got two teams actually, but there's some overlap in terms of people. But yeah, I'm doing my best to keep busy right as the improv boom kind of collapses around me. So
So are you like is it through are you taking like classes or anything like that or just doing the shows and stuff? Like
uh, I've gone through the UCB program, but it's kind of
okay,
like I mean there are people who do that for like 10 years. They keep taking classes, but
sure.
but it's not really, if you want to keep doing it, you can.
So you have done the UCB, you've done the whole thing or is it just like I guess like the different levels whatever, but
Yeah,
um
I've gone through their core program. Yeah.
oh that's cool. Yeah, I didn't know that. Yeah, so are you like are your teams just fellow UCB alumni kind of thing? Like or are they just people that you've met like recently or people you've known for a
Yeah,
while?
they're pretty much all UCB people. That's kind of one of the funny things about like improv in New York is there's like three kind of big schools, which is the UCB, the Pit, the People's Improv Theater, and the Magnet, and they're all like they're not the same thing, but they're like 80% the same thing. But it's this weird thing where whichever program you go through, those are the people you hang out with forever.
Oh
So it,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. That's I don't know. It's funny, kind of it's a funny world. Like when you like I felt like a few years ago I was completely unaware of all of that, and then I've slowly kind of become more impressed and kind of um interested in that kind of like just learning a little bit of it just from noticing that a lot of the people that I thought were funny were UCB alumni kind of thing. Like it just, or like something like that, you know? I mean, growing up, I knew a lot about, not a lot, but like I knew of Second City kind of stuff just because that was quite
Mhm.
big in Canada. Um, but yeah, I just, like people like the Hollywood Handbook guys and stuff seeing, um, I guess like they're have some sort of association or used to. And, um, yeah, I don't know. So it's kind of interesting. So what's different about like that kind of program than the other ones, as you kind of pointed out? Like I know the book, like the people always talk about the standard improv book, whatever, like Truth and Comedy, that kind of stuff, like the very basic kind of improv stuff. But and I think you recommended the UCB manual to me or something, and so I have that. I haven't read it yet, but what's the unique kind of thing that they sell, kind of thing, like their kind of message?
The UCB thing is they call it game, and it's kind of it's their approach to improv. It's kind of a writer-centric approach, in that what you're looking for is what they call the first unusual thing, and then you kind of explore and develop that. So it's very premise first in that way. The like more of the Second City or now IO is what they split their improv branch onto. It tends to be a little bit more character first,
Hmm.
which means they come from a place of like, you find a funny character and then you kind of exist in that character and you deepen that character. And UCB tends to be a little bit more like in the IO model, if it's like, oh, it's sunny out, but you have an umbrella, then that's you build a character out of this person. In the UCB model, it's like, uh, okay, well, here's a premise. There's somebody who has an umbrella when it's sunny out. What does that say about them? What does that say about the world? Like, how do we explore it in that way versus like the character first way? Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, like so Second City, I guess people like I mean, some of the people in Improv Olympics were like I guess like Mike Myers or something like that, maybe like kind of like that really focused on he was right, and then Chris Farley, like people that like that, like the SNL people who are kind of more bringing a lot of
Uh,
energy to a character or something instead of just kind of the thought behind it, maybe.
Yeah, there's a ton of Second City people who've been on Second City and Groundlings too, who've done SNL. Like most of your favorite people from SNL were either Second City or Groundlings, and yeah,
Yeah,
they adapt to it pretty well because it kind of is like that's how they write on that show. And there are some UCB people now on SNL, like I'm going to butcher her name, but like Shahid Zamira or whatever it is.
okay,
I
yeah,
know I said that. She is, I think, a couple other people are, and there's some other people like who are kind of in that world, in that like kind of LAE alt comedy community who've getting on the show now. But I think the thing that really uh, like for your normal kind of online comedy nerd person, I think it was like the LA UCB people are like they have this huge corner of like podcasting now. That's all those
yeah,
guys, and I think that's kind of where a lot of people know it from.
sure. I guess your goal right now is it to just build up your skills and kind of get to the point where you can attract an agent and then move to LA or something? Or is that your arc, do you think, or is it what are you up to?
Yeah, I mean, in a perfect world, I'd move to LA as soon as I'm in a position to where I know I could like make money in LA because there's definitely
Yeah,
more opportunities there. But New York has a lot more opportunities, I think. Even though, as I kind of said earlier, the improv scene here appears to be imploding a little bit. There's a lot more stages to be on, like at my level. And that it's like you're trying to do two things at the same time. Number one, you're getting reps, you're getting better at what you're doing. But number two, it's like this is also the time where like you're meeting the people who, in theory, will be like your cohort. And it's like if you get jobs, like real jobs, it will probably be because of these people.
Yeah, that's true. That makes a good point. Yeah.
I heard something on this other podcast I was listening to, and they were saying that New York, like the difference between New York and LA is like in New York, that's where you can kind of like build your act. These are stand-ups in particular talking about this. But that in LA, that's where you build like your fan base. So like they were saying that these are New York guys, and they were saying that like if they were in LA, they'd probably be 4 times as big as they are, but their act wouldn't really develop. Like they, you kind of have to like work for it in New York a little bit more. I don't know. That sounds kind of like self mythology kind of thing. But what do you think of that?
I think it's true to some extent, just in terms of in New York, there's just a ton of rooms that you can perform in. Most of them are not great, but they're there. You can do it. And you also have the public transit. So, like,
Mm,
people will, if they're club comics, they'll do 2 clubs a night or 3 clubs a night. If you're an open mic comic, you'll just hit open mics all day. And in LA, it's like just because of the layout of the place, even if there were the rooms, you just can't do it. So I think New York's definitely a better place to get good.
right. That makes a lot of sense.
Have you been doing stand up too, or just the improv right now?
I'm kind of a little bit out of love with stand up at the moment. I haven't been doing. I keep saying like, oh, I'm going to start doing stand up again, but I haven't been doing it much lately.
Just as like
So
a
not.
personal thing, or as like an overall kind of like something wrong with the industry kind of thing?
No, I think the industry wise, stand up is actually doing very well now. I think kind of is the air goes out of the improv bubble a little bit. I think stand up's going to start doing better. It's yeah, I just haven't felt the desire recently.
All these lady comedians have pushed old Brian out of the spotlight here.
Okay, guys, this is what I really wanted to come on here and talk about. It's so hard for me right now as a white man because everybody's just booking these spaces that it's like we want female comics, we want comics of color, we want LGBTQT comics,
Yeah.
and there's just no room in the industry anymore for just a poor white man just with white experiences who just likes being white, and it's not fair. It's what I like to call a kind of racism, but like in reverse somehow.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's interesting. Yeah. Did
yeah,
you
like
invent that? Yeah.
well, I'm working on it, but it's not like a theory yet. But there's some sort of like reversed racism, I think, is what's happening to me.
Yeah, I think there's an hour there. I think that would be you could probably, milk that for an hour, I think. Yeah. Um
That'll be my first hour, and my second hour will be my kids are such assholes.
yeah. Um so you're saying that it's a bubble right now that's bursting. Like is that a specific reason? Are you talking about like problems within UCB or problems within like the whole kind of is it just the demand's not there, or is it like that just long-standing kind of institutional problems are kind of creeping up?
Like fundamentally, I think it's just improv doesn't make a lot of money, and it's propped up by the schools. That's kind of the model that improv has become,
Yeah.
and I think just people. Uh, it's not that less people are into it. I think what's actually happened is there were so many people who are into it, and then those people left New York and LA and Chicago and went back to their hometown. And now, if you want to learn long form improv, you can do that in Florida. Whereas I think 10 years ago you couldn't. And as a result, there's less people doing it in New York. And I think there might be a little bit less money coming in because of that. And so, and I mean, plus just general New York stuff, just always rents raising, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
Has there been any kind of thing with like improv sort of doing shows over the internet or anything like that? Like either podcasts or some kind of live stream type thing? Because I feel like it's so wedded to the like you buy a ticket, you go see a show at a particular location, and it hasn't really found an avenue like online yet.
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting thing because there's only a few things that make money by selling tickets, even in improv, and those are for the most part that's either short form or like very high concept stuff. Like improvised Shakespeare does very well. Some of the musical stuff does well. Like I have a friend who's on something called Batsu, which is they do short form, but then it's like basically whoever loses, they do jackass stuff, like they get shot by a paintball gun or whatever. Like that's the kind of stuff that makes money in improv. Um, just the long form, more theatrical type of stuff has really never made money, and it's also like nobody's successfully translated it to TV because like part of the magic of it is like the immediacy of it. Like you're building this kind of in joke with the audience. It's like watching people discover it, and I think all that gets lost a little bit if you're not like part of the experience. I don't know. I think people could stream stuff on Twitch and like
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
I don't know if anybody's going to get rich doing that, but I mean, I bet somebody would watch it. You know, I bet you can make a few bucks doing it. You know, somebody could. And it just hasn't happened yet. There's a little bit of stuff in the West Coast, like Mitch Live, if you guys have heard of that. That's it's like a talk show kind of format, but I mean, they stream it on Twitch, and it's one of the hosts from Doughboys is the Mitch in question, and it's like they basically just like spring stuff on him, and if you know him, you know he's like what the fuck to everything, and it's very funny. But yeah, there's not a lot of stuff in that space, and I don't know, seems like there should be because especially now we're getting into this weird place where there's these people who have podcasts that are doing like okay, but it seems like they're making a lot of their money by like they have Twitch streams where they're all like playing Fortnite or whatever and just chatting and stuff. So it's like I don't know. It's a weird time to try and make any money on this stuff right now.
Yeah, and I mean, it also seems kind of a bit uneven too, where there's people kind of making some money off some podcasts and things like that, but the actual money you can get from, say, writing on a show or on it, like for a movie or something like that, is just so. It seems like orders above that, to me at least, like a lot of that, especially for like kind of like maybe not just comedy stuff, but maybe more kind of like mainstream stuff. It seems like, but there's a small number of jobs for that too. So I don't know. It's very I don't know, because people, I mean, people do say that to me sometimes. They're just like, "Well, you should try to write for this or that," and I'm like, it just seems like it's such a strange kind of industry where people really know each other quite like tightly, kind of, you know, like, and very competitive and stuff. It's very kind of strange. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's really who you know, but I mean, I guess that's true about, you know, honestly, that's true about, you know, anything. I mean, that's how you become a plumber too. But yeah, especially when you're talking about like you know, that kind of like network stuff where you actually make like really good money. It's like that's not really that many jobs, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. No, it's funny. I mean, we were kind of talking about this in another episode, where there are a lot of just all sorts of jobs, especially in entertainment, where there's a large number of people kind of not, you know, like people kind of focus on the jobs that kind of like the core of the profession where they probably pay really well, and then there's kind of like a lot of people at the margins of that kind of not doing as well, and then there's also beyond that just a large number of people who just don't even seem to be actually in the game in any way, like not even really giving any effort that they would need to like make it, kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like just kind of completely delusional about their chances of like getting anywhere or doing anything. And it's kind of it's like I don't know, and that I not even just in entertainment or writing or anything like that, but just like in I mean even like law school or something like that. Like just there's huge or like academia or something. There's huge numbers of people competing for a small number of jobs now. It's very strange. I don't know. Yeah.
oh, that's kind of a funny story is when I decided to seriously pursue comedy was after I finished my my bachelor's. And my two things I was thinking about were do I want to pursue you know, do I want to do post-secondary in sociology or do I want to like give comedy a real try? And
Yeah.
uh, like I kind of did a little bit of research and I realized that like my prospects of getting a real job were probably actually better in comedy.
Yeah.
That's probably true.
Yeah. So yeah, it's pretty wild when you think about it. Yeah, but I don't know. Yeah, I mean, and also, I mean, are you working at all? Do you have like projects you're kind of thinking about, like long term? Like, do you have like certain kind of things you're like, if I get to this certain level, I'll be able to like produce this or something, or are you just kind of interested in the day to day kind of stuff right now?
Right now, I feel like I'm just working on developing my voice and getting good. That's one thing that all like most of the stand-ups I respect talk about in the early days is they're like, you know, I just worried about getting good and like the opportunities happened. And I think partially that's because like if you're good, people see that, but also it's because like the people you're getting good with are the people who are going to like create that situation for each other. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this on another episode too. About I was talking about Steve Martin's book. Did you read that one about at all or no? Steve
Yes,
Martin. Yeah.
and yeah, I would very if you care at all about comedy, even if you don't like Steve Martin, read that book because he really talks about process and like it's very rare that stand-ups actually talk about process.
And I really like that part. Tom actually clipped it out because I put it on YouTube because I was talking about how that he has that kind of almost like sum up of where he says, I spent like maybe 8 years just trying to get a voice kind of thing, and then 4 years kind of coming up with an actual act kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like he kind of goes through how long of a process it was for him. And I think it was maybe a bit longer for him than a lot of other people. But still just it's quite amazing to kind of as he kind of walks through it and stuff. And I thought the other thing that was really good about that book too is that when he talks about how a lot of people who are like funny or like just kind of have like the kind of perspective or something never take it to the point where they could do it if like say a server drops a glass and they have to kind of finesse that situation or something. You know what I mean? Like they don't have that kind of like they're saying it's a lot harder to actually do than you might believe because you've got to have the skills to the point where you can manage the situation even if you shouldn't be in control of it because of things happening and stuff. I found that fascinating. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I think that's true. That like being a good performer isn't necessarily the same skill as being good at being funny.
Mhm. Yeah. So, are there any books that actually you've read that kind of like, or like, experiences like that that have kind of brought forward those kind of things that you're kind of want to work on? Or
Not on that level. Will Hines has a book, an improv book that How to Become the Best Improviser in the World. I'd recommend that one. It's a very good book if that's something you're interested in because he talks about process a little bit, but he also talks about process like outside the context of performing. Like he talks about learn to perform with difficult people because it'll make it stuff like that.
yeah, that's interesting. I think you recommended me that book too before. I just didn't get it yet.
Hey, you're doing all right. You don't need to worry about improv.
No. It's interesting. I like that kind of reading that kind of stuff. I don't know. I found that uh reading a little bit about improv before actually really increased my appreciation for other kind of performers or something like that. You know what I mean? Like people that were talking, you know what I mean? Like talking about comedy and stuff, like especially the kind of like Hollywood Handbook kind of stuff where they kind of play around with they kind of bat the ideas back and forth to each other and kind of run with it. That kind of stuff didn't really make sense to me until I kind of understood the logic behind it, and I was like, oh, it's actually I don't know because it also kind of increased my respect for like not trying to overwrite everything kind of thing, like for kind of like I don't know, like a lot of the kind of more stand up stuff can be very kind of I don't know, like overwritten, I think, or something like that. Yeah, I don't know, but yeah. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it's the most powerful exclamation point is a period. Just just say something and then be done. it's a
yeah,
it's a good lesson and it's hard to learn. Yeah.
sure. So when you were growing up in Alaska and stuff, and like how did you kind of start this kind of journey towards that kind of like performing and stuff like that? Like, was that something you did early on, or was that like were you kind of like I don't know, like watching SNL and Mad TV or something like that on TV every night or something like that, or is that kind of your experience or something like that, or
Yeah, I always like that kind of stuff. And that is, I was just talking to somebody about this the other day. It's kind of funny when you're like 10 years old or whatever, and it's like comedy is like Saturday Night Live to you. Like that's all it is. You don't know what comedy is outside of that context.
yeah,
And so it's like, yeah, like you think that's so it's like, okay, well, I gotta like develop these characters and like do this kind of stuff. And it's yeah, I don't yeah, I didn't fall in love with stand up until I saw like Hedberg on Letterman, and that would have been like, I mean, I was probably been like 19 or 20,
yeah,
Yeah,
not to
that's
date myself
interesting.
here.
I think most people kind of get the bug a little bit earlier than that. That's pretty late.
Yeah, I mean, I was always into like theater and performing and all that stuff, but like that was the one I was like, oh, like this makes sense too. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So, were you kind of like, and the kind of the people around him too? Not, I mean, he was kind of unique, but sort of that cohort of comedians. Did you really sort of like that alternative comedy kind of stuff. Did you from there then kind of get into that, and then kind of from there kind of get into improv kind of stuff, or is that like, because that seems like a common kind of thing, like people kind of then kind of go on to like people like say Patton Oswalt or David Cross and that kind of stuff, because that would be in the same kind of time, I guess, right? Like that, or were you just kind of focused on that kind of more, even more alternative than that or something?
Yeah, no, from yeah, like that kind of group of people who kind of blew up around then, kind of like early 2000s ish.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah, I got into a lot of those guys, like Arj Barker, I love like a lot. Um, and then like I kind of worked backwards a little bit, like yeah, like I got into Mr. Show and like that kind of stuff, like at that time.
Hmm. Did you ever have like a period where you just listened to a lot of the like kind of classic kind of stuff? Like, did you kind of work through kind of like an archive almost of, all the different like Richard Pryor and all that kind of thing? Because that's, I know that was probably the generation, like a few generations before. You kind of hear that a lot, people saying about they just had all the records and stuff and would listen to them obsessively or something. So, like, do you have like, do you, I mean, do you spend a lot of time kind of just trying to hear everything, or is it just kind of, do you just kind of focus on people that you are more interested in?
I've gone through a lot of it, but it's one of those things where, and it happens in any field, where it's like, like you go back and listen to like Bob Newhart, for instance, and he's still like so good, but also like everything he's doing, like people have been ripping him off for like, 50 years, 60 years, 70 years.
Sure.
So it's not as, it's like, okay, like I get how important this is, but like it's hard to find it funny in the same way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of comedy is sort of like that. Like after a certain period of time, it really just you can tell that it was funny, but it's just doesn't really work. Like just in terms of the rhythm and everything. Like if you listen to like Lenny Bruce or even something like Richard Pryor, I think it's so much more of like a slow paced kind of thing. It just doesn't really have that same comedic rhythm that we have these days. It doesn't hit you the same way, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, personally, I find it a lot different where I don't care about the material as much, but I really like the rhythm and kind of stuff. I don't know. I find that I actually do really like the different pacing and all that kind of stuff. I find that I don't know, like fascinating. I don't know. I just really like that. Like I always like I find that with George Carlin or something where I don't really care what he's talking about, but I really like his kind of excitement and kind of you know what I mean? Like I
Yeah.
don't know, like a lot of his specials, he has so many specials and so many of them are just kind of whatever to me, but the actual just how he kind of says things is so interesting to me. I don't know, yeah. So,
Yeah, he was a guy who like really really wrote, like those
yeah.
jokes were super super polished. So yeah, and that's something in the Steve Martin book that I like so much. He talks so much about finding not only like his jokes, but like finding the rhythm he wanted to deliver them in. Like yeah, that's a really big part of it. But yeah,
Mhm.
definitely listening to like like a Lenny Bruce type. It's like or Richard Pryor. It's like you do lose a lot of that now because part of what was so like exciting and revolutionary about that was like what they were willing to talk about it and how they were willing to talk about their lives and their
Yeah,
feelings and all that kind of stuff. And that's all very like very done at this point.
Yeah,
sure.
that's true.
Yeah, I mean, I saw a good, I think it was the PBS documentary about Richard Pryor, and it kind of talked about how even just his own like life process of, when he started out he wasn't like that at all, basically. Like, I mean, he wasn't like his kind of peak performance. He was kind of, he tried to do kind of like the way that they described him in the documentary, like some of the people said it was almost like a second string kind of Bill Cosby kind of thing, where it was like
Mm.
very kind of straight and kind of just kind of very careful. And then um once he kind of had hit like a turning point, he just kind of said, forget this, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And there was a huge response for it, obviously, like talking like people actually talk kind of thing, instead of just kind of doing this kind of stage managed kind of careful kind of speaking. I don't know, I think that's, yeah, but it's hard because we're on the other side of that, yeah. So it's like there's decades of people that have already kind of followed in that, but yeah, I don't know, not sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's always room for somebody with like a unique voice to do really well, but like it's very hard to have a unique voice.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. I'm gonna try to write a book soon. I guess is like my new project, and it's funny because I was walking around the different bookstores, kind of like just trying to get an idea of like, I don't know, maybe overthinking it, but kind of like just looking at what other books are out there and what my first reaction to them was and kind of stuff, and kind of just, you know what I mean, like literally judging books by their cover kind of thing, just like seeing things and kind of going, oh, I wouldn't want to write something like that. Oh, I'd like something like that kind of thing. And there's so many comedy books out and so many like humor kind of oriented books um, that just look like either dated immediately or just very difficult. Like kind of it just don't. It's so it seems like it's kind of a hard thing to kind of I don't know, and it's kind of like made me kind of want to simplify and kind of almost kind of avoid being a bit wacky and kind of stuff and just kind of you know what I mean, like be a bit more straight with it and then just kind of hope it's funny.
Yeah,
Kind of
yeah,
you know
no,
what
I
I mean,
see
like
what you're
adding things
saying.
into it. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a. I was DMing with you, and you told me you were going to write a book, and I was like, "What's the book going to be about?" And you left me on red, and I was like, "Okay, so I know where he's at then."
Yeah. No, I mean, I just, yeah, I didn't know what to say right away, so I don't know. But, yeah, it's a very strange, process. I don't know. It's all new to me, but yeah. So, but I mean, I don't know. I've been able to kind of write a little bit here and there and, it's fun, but it's a different experience from just sending off a tweet here and there. I don't know. Especially with editors, you kind of have to actually think through and kind of defend yourself and kind of understand what you're saying, kind of thing. You know what I mean? A bit more than just kind of here's an idea kind of thing. And that I don't know. Yeah, I've always thought that I would be too anxious to do something. I mean, I used to do improv when I was very young, like in like high school and stuff.
Hmm.
But I don't know. Maybe that's something down the road or something. I could do something like that for fun. Just as like a fun thing to try to do. I don't know. It'd be probably good for social anxiety. I don't know. But that's what everyone says.
Yeah,
But
well,
yeah.
that's one thing definitely about improv. I mean, and stand up too a little bit, but improv more so. Like every person who does it is like anxious. I don't know
Yeah,
why, but yeah.
sure.
So
Um,
yeah.
is that? I mean, even just is that something you've been able to kind of work through and work on while you're there too? I mean, is that like have you gotten to the point now where it doesn't bother you to get on stage, or is it still kind of a difficult thing? I don't know.
I don't have stage fright, especially
Okay.
for improv. For written stuff, I do a little bit just because I'm terrible at memorizing because I didn't act for a long time.
Yeah.
But for improv, it's like you can't really fail. Or, I mean, you can have a bad show, but you can't like do it wrong. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Um,
Um,
so yeah, I'm not a big stage fright person. I get nervous about other stuff. Like I'm much more nervous in like day to day life than I am like in a defined space where it's like, okay, I'm performing now. I'm allowed to do what I want. That's fun. That's easy.
do you find that it's helped the other side though, or is it just kind of pretty much the same as it was for a while? I guess I don't know.
Um, uh, as I become an old man, like I'm not like I'm doing all right these days. You know what I
Okay.
mean? Like
Yeah.
I'm not. As a younger man, I had a much harder time, but these days I'm almost a real person. I'm doing
Sure.
okay.
Okay.
What do you
Um,
think that is? Because I think that a lot of people sort of seem to have that experience where as you get older, these kind of things just sort of they're not as strong, you know. They kind of get weaker and or you get stronger or something.
Uh, my theory is that 100% it's just failing. It's just going through life, and it's like, okay, you're nervous about talking to girls. Well, eventually you talk to girls, and it goes bad, and it feels terrible, and then you work up your courage and you do it again, and it feels terrible, but it feels a little bit less terrible. And then next thing you know, like you're in your late 20s, you're in your 30s, and it's like you didn't magically get good at it. You just built up a thick skin. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think there's something to that. Like you just failed enough that it's kind of like old hat, and then
It,
it's like, well, what's another failure? Who cares?
yeah,
yeah.
I think that's kind of why people, as they get older, they like don't they're less likely to do like new hobbies because it's like you've gone through so many things that you've gotten good at, you've gone through that process at, and then you look at like ballroom dancing and it's like, no, like I'm not going to be bad at something again. I'm 45 years old. I'm
Yeah.
done with that.
I was talking with someone and we were sort of talking about this subject, and what we were saying was that like you as you get older you sort of like know what you like and you just know like you're much more confident about the your first impressions of things. You're like, I'm just not going to enjoy that. I'm going to go there. It's going to be boring. It's going to be annoying or whatever it is. You kind of, or the opposite. You look at something, you're like, yeah, that's what I want to do, and you just go do it. And it's not this sort of like, oh, what is this? Am I going to like this? Am I not going to like it? There's not that same kind of thing, which makes it less exciting, I guess. But it also is like more time efficient, which I guess matters more and more as you get older.
Yeah, there's definitely like, yeah, the path gets narrower, I think. Yeah, you kind of you know who you are, and that's yeah, you might be a little bit less exciting, but like you're less, yeah, yeah, you're not gonna screw up half as much.
Yeah, and that might play into the lessening of anxiety too, because you're not, if something goes bad, it doesn't make you like some kind of huge loser. You already know like who you are, so it's like, well, people lose sometimes. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, I think there definitely is that too, of like after you feel like you have mastery over like some parts of your life or whatever, like if you fuck something up, but yeah, it's definitely like, well, okay, but like I'm still, a successful businessman or whatever. I don't have to freak out.
Yeah, you got your millions that you can kind of depend on. Your big fancy sports car, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and that's why I kind of got into improv because there's not really much money in improv, but I do already have my millions. So it's kind of like, hey, what's the worst that could happen? You know what I mean? Like I have to
Right.
spend some of my millions, whatever.
Yeah, good stuff.
Oh, good stuff. Classic.
All right, should we get into the questions?
Sure.
So how does this work? You guys will read questions and we'll all answer them.
Yeah, pretty much. I'll be asking the questions, I guess. Let's see. We got some political stuff, some religious stuff. I'm not sure if that's what we're going for. Um, all right, Brian. How do you all feel about Jews?
Um, since we were talking about entertainment stuff, this is a secondhand story, but I thought it was very funny of somebody who was Jewish who got into improv and was like, I thought there were supposed to be Jews in comedy. How come none of these people are Jewish? And then when they eventually got to the point of like writing, they're like, oh, they're here getting paid.
That's
So
funny.
I don't know if I'm even allowed to say that, but because I am. I'm a nice boy, but I do have the haircut of a member of the Aryan Brotherhood, so I got to be careful.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, on our alt-right podcast, which you agreed to be on,
Wait, this is all right?
no, that's fine.
I thought you said it was an all right podcast, and I was like,
Okay.
talk yourself up a little bit, man.
Okay.
No, that's the humor that's going to send me right to the top.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know. I've got general positive feelings towards the Hebrews.
Yeah, I'm pro Jews. Jews are great. I'm friends with Jews.
Okay.
Is
I
that the
will.
worst thing to say?
I'm gonna plead the fifth or whatever on this one.
Okay.
How about this one? What are your favorite podcasts? I guess I can start with this one. I think my favorite one going right now is Theo Vaughn's podcast. I think he's really funny. Let me see, what else do I have that I like? I listen to I think I mentioned it. Like I listen to Joe Rogan and Joey Diaz and all those types of guys. I've been getting into like the Legion of Skanks and Real Ass Podcast, and those New York dudes.
Yeah.
Chris D'Elia's okay. I listen to Red Scare. What's Left? Oh, you know what I started listening to recently? Speaking of alt right, is Gavin McInnes. And I don't know. I think he's really funny. I mean, I don't agree with him politically. I don't know what he's trying to do, like politically. What he's going for like this really like 90s Fox News conservative thing. I don't. It doesn't seem genuine to me. I really don't know what he's thinking with that. But he still cracks me up. I mean, he's always been funny even since Vice, and he doesn't really talk about politics as much on his podcast, so I kind of enjoy it.
Fair
And
enough.
then I listen to a bunch of Muslim stuff.
Yeah, I don't know. I listened to The Age of Napoleon. Your Kickstarter sucks. Um, I don't know. Lots of that kind of stuff. The Brunig podcast, Chapo, stuff like that. I don't know. Hollywood Handbook. Yeah.
Um, I listen to a lot of the LA alt comedy UCBE stuff, a lot of the Earwolf stuff.
Yeah.
Doughboys is probably my number one. I listen to your Kickstarter stocks. I listen to Chapo. All the things that I vaguely know the people from. Here's a good one. I listened to this one called Improv Beat by Beat, which is
Mhm.
by a UCB New York guy, and he basically just interviews other UCB New York guys about improv. It's a really good learning podcast, but it's also like those are people who aren't on as popular a podcast as the LA guys, or you don't see them as much in stuff. So if you'd like to get to know some of those people, get to know a little bit about them, it's a great podcast for that.
Cool. Yeah, I'll check that one out. Improv
Yeah,
Beat
that's
by
cool.
Pete. Yeah. Cool.
Okay, let's move on here. All right. What do you think of Karl Marx? Okay. I don't know,
um,
Kevin or Brian. Have you read Marx, or what do you think about Marx?
Karl Marx. I think he's a cool guy. Love to get to meet him someday. Um, like my dream dinner party would be Karl Marx, Jesus, Abraham Lincoln, Jesus again, and then Frank Sinatra. So he's in the list.
all smoking
Okay.
cigars and playing poker. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
drinking sherry, etc.
yeah.
My
Um,
first thought is that he'd be on a hemorrhoids pillow because he had that issue.
sure. Yeah, I don't know. I like Marx. I don't know. I think it's interesting. Um, it's weird how it became like I used to always think that people are kind of exaggerating, that they kind of take it too seriously or something like that. You know what I mean? Like that I don't know, like I always thought like, oh no, this is really interesting kind of thing. But it's very strange how people kind of treat it as a single system that they kind of have to understand every aspect of, when I feel like it's one of those things where if you just boil it down to something pretty simple, like changes in society have finally made it where planning is more viable. Like if you just say that, you don't really have to. I don't know a lot. I mean, he does go into like the details of like this and that about like capital and stuff, but I feel like a lot of that is it's more than what most people need from it, kind of thing, or something like that. You know what I mean? Like it's not like I don't know. Like most people aren't going to sit around and worry about the circulation of capital and all that kind of stuff. But I don't know. Like it kind of gets blown up into this kind of like system, but where it probably shouldn't. I mean, if it's true, then it doesn't really matter who said it or whatever kind of thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, if he points out something that's true, then you should be able to just to identify what's true about it and then go on with the rest of your day. You don't need to read every single one of his books and try to, apply it to your life like it's some kind of like religious scripture or something. I think people get kind of weird about it. And there's because it's not like it's just him observing something and pointing it out. Like you can probably get more out of like later writers who have had time to digest those ideas and debate them and evolve them over time and now apply them to like the actual context of today rather than looking to like some book written in the 1800s or whatever and trying to apply that. Like just do that with a book that someone who knows what they're talking about did like in the past 5 years or something.
Um, could I serious answer real quick?
Sure.
No.
Uh, um, uh, I think for your communism type stuff, it can be useful to look at a post-Marx thinker, but like the basic like social theory, like historical materialism type stuff, it's so incredibly useful in terms of analyzing things and looking at things. Again, sociology is what I did go to school for, and it's like People just don't do it and they don't think about it. And if you just apply it, it's truly a magic trick to like let you see like why things happen and where things are coming from in society.
Yeah,
I think uh, even if you're a communist, you want to be post-Marx, fine. If you're not a communist, fine. But I think it really is important to have like a basic understanding of that if you care at all about like looking at cause and effect and, I mean, just social organization.
sure.
Yeah, I know what you mean with it being like a magic trick. Like I kind of remember having that kind of experience where it was almost like the they live glasses thing,
Yeah.
and you sort of like just something clicks and you sort of realize, uh, uh, you just look at the world a bit differently. And I think people almost get like addicted to that feeling and they try to like chase it and force it. And it's like, it's just something you realize. It's not actually like something in the book that is going to like constantly give you that experience over and over.
Yeah, I think there is a danger in kind of like, I mean, all political thought, not just leftist thought, of like kind of wanting to chase that high of kind of like that Gnostic, if I'm even saying that right, revelation sort of.
hmm I wonder if like people who read like Hitler and stuff have that same thing. Like that same thing clicks in their brain. Like, oh yeah, it is the Jews all along.
Yeah.
Well, isn't that seriously like Jordan Peterson? Like for real, isn't all he's basically doing is like saying Bible stuff, but he just phrases it in this way where it lets like you feel like you know something other people don't know. Like, I mean, isn't like seriously, isn't that the appeal?
I don't. Yeah, I'm not sure. I
Maybe
mean,
I think a lot of it is like Carl Jung that's
yeah,
just
yeah.
kind of packaged as like a self-help thing. Um, I actually listened to his lecture series on the Bible, and it was sort of interesting if you take it for what it is, which is like a Jungian reading of the of not exactly the Bible. He kind of like refers to the Bible. It's not really an analysis of. He maybe looks at like a few of the stories and talks about them in brief. He doesn't really deeply analyze them or anything, but uh, it's fine for what it is, but yeah, it definitely becomes like this whole self help like cultish thing. Okay, I guess I'll go on to the next question here.
Hey, first, let me just say, great discussion, guys. Really knocked it out of the park on that one.
Okay.
All right, thanks, Brian. Okay, Don. Someone is asking if they should go to Mongolia.
To Mongolia?
That's literally all it says. They don't have any kind of other. They're not explaining what their motivations or what their interests in Mongolia are. They're just asking you if they should go.
Um, I guess for me, I would be like, well, why would you want to go to Mongolia specifically that you just couldn't go to China or something? Or like, you know what I mean? Just like, you know what I mean? Like, what is it about itself? Because there's like a lot of Mongolians and Mongolian like stuff in China. I don't know. I just feel like, why would you add complicated things to your journey kind of thing? You know what I mean? I don't know. No, no, I don't know. It seems like a cool place. I wasn't there. I was sort of close. I went to north of Beijing, I guess, but I didn't really go to um for like a day. But I didn't really go to Mongolia. I don't know, but yeah, I don't know. Like uh, I do think that those kind of like frontier areas in and around China are really like amazing. I don't know, like they're um and I don't know how to, you know what I mean? Like they're but um it's also probably like a lot poorer than people are used to and a lot more like um I don't know. It's not like, you know what I mean? It depends what they want out of it, I guess is the thing, right? Like cuz if you're going to if you're going to like a frontier area, it's going to be, and especially in that region, like it's going to be sort of like worn down and kind of poor a lot of the places and kind of like, I don't know. So that's what I would, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know if there are people that already go to places like rural Vietnam or something like that, then they probably would have fun. But if there are people that just go on vacation to sun destinations or something, it'd probably be a big hassle for them, I guess. I don't know.
So if they want to like drink bone broth in a torn out apartment building, yes. If they want
Yes,
to get a tan, that's a no.
pretty much.
Yeah. There's a cool YouTube channel that that I subscribe to that does like it's supposed to be about Mongolian food, but it's sort of like half kind of just like touristy kind of stuff. Let me see if I can find it real quick. I mean, Mongolia looks really cool from that channel. Especially like once you kind of get out of the cities and stuff. The cities like do look kind of dumpy, but the just being on the steppe seems kind of neat. Very
Yeah,
different from like a lot of other places.
but you probably want to be like have traveler skills or something like that too before you start going somewhere like that. I think.
Yeah, and like a horse.
Yeah, yeah, in a yurt. Yeah.
You gotta
Yeah.
have a yurt.
Yeah.
That's so funny how that's like a little trend kind of thing. People want to live in yurts,
Yeah, when they had
save money or whatever.
when they had Occupy Wall Street, like in Toronto, the unions bought like or like had or something. I don't know if they had, but they rented at the very least like a bunch of yurts and just put them in the park or whatever. And I don't know. I just thought it was like a strange kind of I don't know globalism or something. I don't know. You know what I mean like
Yeah.
like having yurts in the middle of Toronto. I don't know. Yeah.
Oh,
Actually,
they
that was
look cool though. Let's
yeah.
be honest.
When I was in Western China, I saw like Kazakh, I guess Kazakh have yurts, or whatever. So they had them on the hills and stuff, and I don't know. It was pretty cool looking. I don't know.
Well,
But
I
also,
do. That's an Alaska story I can tell you. I do have
oh
two
yeah,
friends who live in a yurt.
oh yeah,
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they got kind of they built kind of like a permanent base for it, and they kind of like built it up over time. But it was like a tent that they kind of like have turned into a house that like looks like a yurt.
oh yeah.
Hmm.
That's cool.
What I like about yurts is how you step into it and it is such like a enclosed world of its own. Like it seems like it just has this totally different feeling from like being outside. Like it just is so well insulated or whatever. That's just kind of neat.
Yeah.
I found that YouTube channel I was talking about. It's called Artger, Artger. If anyone's interested in Mongolia, I highly recommend they check that out. And speaking of yurts, you know the word yurt, that's just the word for land in Mongolian. And so when Russian uh, people, arrived in Mongolia and were just sort of like reporting back about their life and all that kind of stuff, like they were just saying that they live in yurts. And I think what happened was, they're asking them what the words for different things are, and they pointed at the yurt, and they're like, "What's that?" And the Mongolians are just like, "Yurt, yurt," and they're just saying that's the ground, stupid. Like, what are you asking me?
Yeah.
Because their yurts they're mobile. They would pack them up
Yeah.
and whatever with them. So I don't think they thought of it as like this is my home. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I guess we knew surprisingly a fair amount about Mongolia. I mean, like we were able to offer a few things there. I don't know. That was good.
You never
Instead
know
of,
until you ask, I guess.
yeah.
All right, let's do one more here. Okay. This one's kind of annoying, but we can get into this one. Do you think Come Town crosses the line into being actually bigoted, racist, or whatever? I feel like it's obviously in the subtle tone of anyone who actually thinks this way is stupid and racist, and anyone who wants to wet their pants about it is annoying and not in on the joke. But I think a lot of Twitter big shots listen to it but don't acknowledge it, which is quite funny. I don't think it's racist or whatever. I mean, yeah. I mean, I listen to like actually racist things, so like, that to me is like not not on my radar as like something that's offensive or whatever. It's so left wing. Like if you compare it to like a lot of other stuff that people put out there, I don't know. I think people live in little discursive bubbles online where they don't even realize like what is actually being said in the world and what people actually think. And anyone who like slightly deviates from what their norm is, they're just like, oh, that must be what a racist is. I've heard about these people. It's like, no, I don't think you know what a real racist sounds like, buddy. I don't know, what do you guys think?
But that's definitely something I'd say. Like working on construction sites for on and off for over a decade. Like there's some pretty hateful stuff thrown out pretty casually, and it doesn't look like Come Town. You know what I mean? Like if you've seen the real thing, that's not it. I'm not saying it's great, but it's like it's not the real thing.
Yeah.
I think yeah, it's kind of that we had talked about this maybe before, but it's a lot of it is just kind of voicing kind of thoughts that float into their heads kind of thing that um is not it's not I mean it's very deliberately kind of um like here's a thought, uh isn't it funny that this is the kind of thing that people think about or something like that. It's not like here's my terrible opinion, I really believe this and it's important that you believe it too or something like that. It's more kind of like it is kind of like almost like, just kind of an improv kind of thing about um uh terrible subjects or something like that rather than actual like um it's not like uh it has no relation to really to the actual kind of alt-right kind of stuff or something like that, because yeah, it's just not, there's no like animus there really. There's no like, there's no like I'm going to attack someone now or something kind of mentality, I guess. So yeah, but at the same time I could understand why if someone's like really sensitive about it in their own lives or something, or they have certain types of things they are worried about or whatever, they might just not want to listen to it. But that's pretty standard for anything, I guess. So, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I don't know why people are really so intent on pretending they can't tell what someone's intentions are. I mean, I understand sometimes there's some misunderstandings, and maybe if you've gotten the wrong impression about a show and then you go and listen to it and you're like, oh, see, there it is. That's what I've heard about. Maybe that
Yeah.
happens sometimes, but I do think like it's pretty willful on a lot of people's parts to kind of like find enemies, pick fights with things, and it's, try to, I don't know. That stuff is so silly. Like, get a life. What are you doing?
Okay. I promise to get a life. Yeah.
I'll do my level best. Sorry.
Sorry, guys. All right. Well, I think that's pretty good. So it was nice having you on here, Brian.
Hey, well, thank you so much for having me on. I had a great time. In our little pre-show talk, we were like, hey, let's leave the entertainment stuff alone because it's not that interesting. Let's talk about Alaska. And then we mostly talked about entertainment stuff. So I feel like
I
we
found
really
it.
did what we wanted to do.
Well, I really enjoyed it. So I think that's what matters, that I'm entertained. And I don't know.
No, I'm just hoisting
Yeah.
myself by my
Yeah.
own heart a little
Sure.
bit.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. Well, thanks for coming by.
Yeah, we can get into another topic maybe if you come back.
We'll just edit out. We'll edit out all the stuff you said this time. And,
yeah, it'll just be like Alaska. It's really bright out.
That's good.
All right, thanks for coming by, Brian.
It's bright there. All right, let's go to the questions. We don't have any questions today. Thank you so much for coming by. Yeah, no, it'll just be the part where I'm like, I have Jewish friends.
Yeah.
All right,
have
thanks,
a good
guys.
one. Sure.
All right. Well, guys, as usual, you can hit us up with questions at You Can't Win Pod. Follow us on Twitter, all that kind of stuff, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.